Community Services, I should say, starting officially last week. And so Travis is going to take the baton from her, and he's been really helpful as well in just helping provide for logistics support, giving us all the background information on city-owned properties and the like. Am I missing anybody from the project team? I don't think so. And so that constitutes the city side of things, and then we're working in partnership with MIG. And I think I see Councilman Munns here. We appreciate him being here to be a part of this event as well. And so I appreciate you guys all being here and coming out tonight. One other thing I would touch on is tonight's topics, and you'll hear more from this from Daniel, but we're going to be looking at existing conditions, environmental, biological, cultural information, mobility, parking, circulation. And then we're going to segue into the coalition's task tonight, which is to discuss emerging visions and emerging topics in that sense as we make our way to the visions and guiding principles document. One last thing I'll close with is I've also asked MIG to spend a couple minutes tonight answering the question of what is a specific plan anyway? I don't know, it seems like a silly question to ask because that's what this is all about, but I'm sure there are members of the public and certainly maybe members of the coalition that it's still a little bit unclear what a specific plan even is. So hopefully the guys will spend a couple minutes in layman's terms laying that out so we understand even more what this process is about and what the end product is. Okay, and so with that, thanks again for being here. I'm going to pass the mic off to Daniel.
Right, and with that, I'd like to have you join me in thanking the excellent staff under Jeremy's direction. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. It's really been a great experience getting to know the Redding team and you being well served here at the community of Redding. So thank you for the opportunity to work with you in this manner. Again, I'm here with Dan Hamstead, who's a principal with MIG in our Sacramento office. Christine Thompson is our project manager and also strong director of sustainable environmental design for MIG. So we bring a lot of resources to the table. Plus we have a bevy of sub-consultants that you'll have introduced to you at the various points along the way. Remember, we're still at the very, very beginning of this process, and this community coalition idea was to set a framework in place, what we're calling a vision framework and set of guiding principles that will eventually take to the city council for their review and comment. But the idea is that that document would help to guide the technical work and the development of alternatives and ultimately the final specific plan. But we've got a very long way to go before we get there. As Jeremy just said, reviewing real quickly the agenda, we'll do a background presentation on all the existing conditions that we have found so far. We've had our technical team members out in the field. We're going to spend a good portion of the meeting, however, getting your feedback on what we're calling the emerging vision elements for the project. It's still very much a rough cut, and we've been able to synthesize a lot of the comments that we've heard from the open houses, the various community interviews, as well as our very first community coalition meeting. So, and you have a copy of the document that we'll be reviewing with you all this evening, and we ask for your comments along the way. We'll stop and pause and get discussion going as we move through the process. We do have a public comment opportunity, again, 3 minutes each. There's cards at the back if you want to fill in a comment card. We'll go through each of those at the last portion of the meeting to make sure everybody has a chance to weigh in here. We are keeping track of all those comments, by the way, and we have at this point just a rough cut and summary. You'll get a summary in written form of the first coalition meeting, and that'll be developed here and probably sent to you via email following tonight's meeting. So we're going to keep that going as well. So getting on with the rest of the meeting, we like to start and end on time. 7:30 is our conclusion point. So we're going to move right into our overall process schedule again, just in case some of you are joining us for the first time with this process. There will be a series of major reports and analytical documents that are produced as part of this process, as you see along the top end of this diagram. Our community coalition meetings are happening right here as a first part. We're still in phase one. And then there's a whole bunch of additional community meetings, outreach events that we're intending to conduct all the way through all 4 phases of the planning process, with appropriate city planning commission and council review happening all the way along the way as well under coordinating and synchronizing with the 4 phases of the process. There we are from our meeting 2 weeks ago. We're really pleased with the advent of this new wireless technology, and it's really helping the folks that may be at home watching on the internet. We're live streaming this event so we can go out to the broader community, and not everybody can come and spend time in the evening. So this is a way to make the process more accessible, more transparent for a lot more folks, and we intend to proceed that way all the way through the process. Some of the notes that we took are illustrated here, and you'll have a fuller copy of that, as I say, at your desk, and then we have that ready to be printed out as well. The very first coalition meeting, just to highlight some of the things that we heard, I'm not going to go through this in depth, but just to recall some of the discussion around key themes or assets. We talked about the natural beauty and diverse ecosystem, the attractions, the events, the rodeo, all the natural species such as fish and wildlife, the recreation, which is significant, including bicycling, walking, hiking, and of course, there's tremendous local history and culture. These are, again, our attempt at making a summary of the discussion points, and a lot of things overlapped as we went through that discussion. At the same time, there are various challenges that you highlighted, which is the need to protect those natural resources and environmental resources out there, to deal with the Redding Rodeo facility. We know it's aging, it needs improvements. How do we handle that moving forward? The need for vehicle access and emergency evacuation, especially in the upper portion of the study area, which you can see on the map there to the left of the screen. The amount and location and management of parking lots to make sure we can accommodate the events at all the venues, lack of safety, lighting, creating a more welcoming character, and most importantly on this list, you highlighted the need for economic feasibility. Now, we will be going into that in a little more depth this evening as we go through the existing conditions. But again, we have Economic and Planning Systems, one of our longtime teaming partners at MIG, who's done work all over the country on these types of issues, and we'll be calling on them to help us do in-depth economic feasibility analysis for the different ideas associated with the specific plan. The other section we talked about last time, what we called opportunities, and many of you highlighted the need to make more connections with the water, with nature, fishing and activities in the Sacramento River, bicycle and pedestrian trails, much stronger connections to the rich history and culture of the area, family-friendly events. How do we generate some revenue-generating uses and so on that would help to pay for the improvements we're looking at? The welcoming and unique destination that would draw locals and visitors from out of town. Again, comments that you all made in our very last meeting, including finding ways that can complement the existing restaurants' uses of land that are in and around the riverfront. And then what we can do to protect and support the existing residential neighborhoods. Just to highlight briefly, we had some community comments in the meeting itself, as you recall, towards the end. People talked about the need to address a lot of basic issues like those experiencing homeless, trying to keep taxes low and so on. Also making sure that the river is the focal point. That's why we're here as a community, and that's what we're trying to protect. Park Marina being an important connector, and how do we improve the safety, especially in regards to the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it. We wanted to note, as you said, the coalition members that were absent. We're trying to continue the outreach there. We have a member of our team, special consultant that's worked a lot with indigenous nations throughout the United States, and they're helping us with that outreach, and we have developed working relationships offline. So we're really trying to make that a very strong push as part of this process. And then some of you pointed out that this is not really an urban waterfront. You know, this isn't like Chicago or San Antonio. This is a much more of a natural area feel, and we understand that. I think people are definitely highlighting that here in the course of the evening. And then concern about traffic, and we're always concerned about safety, impact on neighborhoods and residential land uses, so we hear you about that, and just want to make sure everyone understands that when you submit a comment, we do read them. They are part of the record, and they are factored into how we develop our plans in the process moving forward. With that, a quick review, and we'll have time for you to weigh in more at the rest of the meeting in the second half. And first of all, I'm going to bring back Dan Amsden to talk about our existing conditions and what we've learned so far. There's a lot of information there, but it is only just the tip of the iceberg. So rest assured, there'll be a lot more detail forthcoming. So here's Dan.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And some applause for Daniel. Good evening, coalition members. Again, Dan Amsden with MIG and community members, council member, and I know we have a lot of folks online as well. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview on our existing conditions work. And I mentioned this a little bit during our last meeting, but we have our full team of technical experts and other consultants working with staff as well, putting together a lot of background reports and technical documents. So those are all in process, but we have a few key things or key highlights that may help tonight's discussion that we want to talk about as well. But first, to Jeremy's point, I wanted to unpack a little bit of what is a specific plan and what does that title actually mean. So the start of this project was really initiated by the Redding City Council. So this is a City of Redding project. And as every city in the county, actually every county in the county, has to prepare a general plan, which is about a 30-year planning document. The city's in the process of actually coming to public hearings and adoption of the citywide general plan pretty soon. A public version is available for review. But a specific plan is a city planning document. It is intentionally designed to focus on a smaller geographical area, so in this case, the riverfront. But what a specific plan includes are things like a vision that we'll be talking about tonight, but also specific goals, policies, and development regulations. And what I mean by development regulations, height, number of units on a parcel, or other characteristics around setbacks or stepbacks of buildings. So it's in a part a regulatory document, but it can also include design guidelines. So type of architectural look, feel, character for new projects or remodel projects. It is a little bit, well, actually a lot more detailed than the city's general plan. That's why it's called a specific plan, but it gets into a couple key areas that are the fourth, fifth, and sixth bullet. Economic analysis and incentives. So as part of this process and a specific plan process, we look at development likelihood, and this could be public or private, but put together some economic analysis for what could be feasible from a funding or financing standpoint. We are required by law and California law to also look at circulation and infrastructure as well. So as part of the extra detail of this planning process, we look at, and with our team, what are the traffic impacts? What are areas that do mobility improvements? But also infrastructure, water, sewer, flooding. All of these things are analyzed as part of the process. And ultimately, CEQA document or environmental impact report as well is prepared on this. What a specific plan is not is an actual development project. And that's a really important nuance, is the specific plan sets the framework or guidelines for what can happen in the future. But it is not a specific public or private development projects. Those come later. So this is really a city planning document and planning tool. The importance of a specific plan, though, is once it is adopted by a city council, and the city council takes formal adoption, future decisions around land use or improvements need to be consistent with the specific plan. So that's decisions by different city departments, but also planning commission and council as well. So it really creates this guidebook and essentially some certainty on the future as well. So I'd like to go through just some key highlights or findings from the initial work that our team has been doing. For those online or in the room, we're going to put all of this on the website, so you don't need to remember anything. But a few key takeaways. We actually had one of our MIG biologists on the site and doing an inventory. Oh, there, I can do a little highlight. Doing inventory of environmental and biological resources about 3 weeks ago. So we're working on a detailed technical document and write-up on this, but a few key takeaways. There are 4 sensitive natural communities. So this would be cottonwood riparian forests, mixed riparian, oak valley riparian, and willow scrub. And those are shown, maybe a little hard to see, but these different color coding, largely in the northern riverfront area. And as a as a reminder, I think we all know this, a lot of this area was disturbed in a gravel pit, so it's not necessarily natural, but natural environments are coming back to life. And so about 60% of the study area is considered a wetland, and this is the river itself, but also the different gravel ponds. We have a number of special status species, actually 10 birds, 7 bats, and 14 fish that fall into this category, but also some invasive species. And while our team was out there, evidence of camping and litter. That's one of the things that also came up during our last discussion as well. So a few other things just to note important to this project is, and by the way, acronyms are at the bottom, but the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife both have jurisdictions over portions or most of this study area, and essentially everything in the 100-year floodplain. So this would be the Sacramento River, different lakes, possibly the ponds and wetlands as well. We're actually working to get a jurisdictional determination on that as part of this process. But that does mean impacts or mitigation or rehabilitation projects or other things that could come as part of this are under the review and regulation of a few state agencies as well. So something to keep in mind. Here's just some site photos our team took, again, when they were out in the field a few weeks ago. Different species, also evidence of camping and litter as well, and some invasive species. Again, all of this will be in a full detailed report, but these are some of the key highlights and takeaways. As Daniel mentioned, we do have a team partner, Tawa, who has been working closely with the indigenous community on one, just sort of cultural learnings and understanding, but also cultural sites as well. We at MIG also have a Native American nation building studio as well. They are working similarly on a detailed report, but a few key takeaways. As we know, the study area has been home to indigenous communities for generations, millennia. But a few key things. In 1922, the Bureau of Indian Affairs brought about 15 acres of land for homeless, misplaced indigenous members of the Pitt River, and really localized some of the areas they could or could not be during that time. But importantly, in the early 20th century, the Redding Rancheria was a federally recognized tribe. However, that was terminated in 1959 and reinstated in 1979. So there's been a lot of changes in just sort of status and also recognition. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but this is part of that understanding and discussions we've already had with the indigenous community, really understanding the different tribes and composition. And I think we're around 13 tribes within the sort of study area or broader study area of this project, including a lot of indigenous community members who are not necessarily members of tribes as well. So there's a lot of folks to be reaching out to and who we are reaching out to as well. But I want to provide a little bit of just context in that. So moving to a little bit of the technical side, and we have GHG, who's doing a great job on infrastructure, mobility, and parking. Some of this, or a lot of this, we talked about at the last meeting, so this is things that most of the community already knows, but we're doing traffic counts and a little more detailed analysis on this as well. So not a big surprise, Highway 44 creates a pretty strong barrier between north and south connections between the two parts of the riverfront, particularly for cyclists and pedestrians. It's really hard to get across the freeway. But also, and this is something I think came up in our last meeting, these lengthy vehicle queues that often develop around Park Marina Drive and Highway 44 interchanges during weekdays. And this is a big issue of just traffic, but also signal lights, programming, these kinds of things, but can also create a safety issue of backing up traffic onto the highway and causing a lot of other events or incidences. So again, as part of this specific plan process, we're looking at all of this stuff holistically and looking at solutions as new ideas or vision elements from this commission and also the community get created. Another big thing from just an existing circulation standpoint is the secondary access to the Northern Riverfront area and really the area around the Sundial Bridge and sort of the more active tourist and community destinations. And the secondary access is both a challenge from a traffic flow standpoint, but it's also an issue around emergency access as well, especially if there's a need to get first responders in, community members out. So this is something, there are some temporary emergency access routes, but this is something we're going to be looking at as part of this planning process to make sure safety is also bolstered as part of the discussion. So Park Marina Drive, as we talked about during the last meeting, it is going through a design study right now, sort of a separate process, but very much complementary to this one. We're going to take in a lot of the findings and information from that project. Currently, it's a 4-lane facility. There are some options right now to increase bike lanes and pedestrian connections as well. So those are things, again, to be studied as part of this project. These are some initial maps, a little hard to see, so I decided to highlight a few things. The purple is actually all of the sidewalks within the city, and this is information we've ground truth with the city. The red circles are showing where there's just missing sidewalks or gaps. So this gets into that infrastructure part of the specific plan. You know, how do we create some additional connections, make sure there's not any missing infrastructure. This is showing bike and pedestrian routes and trails, and it's a little hard to see, but there's actually a trail that comes along Park Marina Drive that is right now classified as a bicycle route because it's on the street as well. But there's a lot of connections, even in the north, that don't fully go anywhere, but in the south, there's a lot of missing connections. So again, opportunities to be thinking about these different connections as well. I apologize, this is data, but I like data, so hopefully you will as well. So on the economic side, a few things just sort of food for thought or in the background as we're thinking about ideas tonight. Redding has around 71% of the jobs in Shasta County, so a big employer relative to the full county. Of course, most of the county is pretty rural, but Redding added around 5,500 jobs over the last 10 years or 1.2% annual growth, which is slightly less than state or national average. So job growth is okay, but not very strong in Redding right now. Healthcare, social assistance, public administration, hospitality, and retail trade are all the largest sectors or the largest amount of the economy. But a quarter of all Redding jobs are in healthcare or social assistance related programs. So the hospital is a big, obviously, driver of that, but also county services as well. We look at, and our team looks at a lot of different ways of sort of estimating future trends. All of them are estimates or forecasts, but they can provide some insights into how we think about planning of the future. Caltrans, which is one source of that, is actually estimating net population migration will continue to be positive in Shasta County. It's a fancy way of saying more people will be moving to Shasta County. The recent fires and rebuilding from the recent fires has actually helped the construction industry in the area because that's part of a rebuild, and that's similar things that are happening in Paradise a little bit longer ago or in Santa Rosa more recently. But state tourism spending projections indicate that Shasta Cascade region will recover back to pre-pandemic levels in 2023. That is a key sort of takeaway here is tourism is forecasted to rebound, actually rebound this year from the pandemic, which is a really positive thing. And talking to our economists, they really mentioned access to nature, outdoor environment, people, all of us being locked up for so many years are looking to get back out. So the last bullet, tourism spending is projected to grow through 2017 in Redding and in Shasta County, but a little bit lower percentage than the rest of the state. And of course, different things can factor into this, but this is just data and projections for right now. So on this slide, the population has been growing, but household size have actually had a minor reduction, so number of people in a household. And what that typically means is an older population, as opposed to a lot of younger people maybe staying or a lot of job growth. So all these things sort of factor into each other. But nearly 43% of Redding households are renter-occupied housing, while the county is a little bit less at 32%. But both the share of renter-occupied housing has been declining in the city and the county, so moving more towards ownership, which is a good thing. Let's see. So nearly 2/3 of the housing units in Redding were constructed between 1940 and 1999, which is on par with most of California. Those are sort of the big housing boom decades. But the county has added 4 times as many new housing units than the city. So again, this is showing these how it relates to these other population numbers as well. But a key thing is probably that third bullet, the income distribution. So around 20% of households earn less than $25,000, half earn between $25,000 and $100,000, so 70% under $100,000. So incomes are not as high as a lot of other parts of the state, but that then turns into the access to jobs and everything else. So again, this is just a bit of background information, but informative on how we kind of think about planning for the future.
Okay, Dan, before we move on, let's just see if there's any follow-up questions, additions from our coalition members regarding the background presentation on information. Okay, Jocelyn, and then, so yeah, you remember how to work the mic. You got to hold down the button until the green light appears.
Got it. Should be on. So I did have a question in terms of Park Marina, and do any of you know, or any city employee know, when Park Marina changed from a 30-mile-per-hour residential zone that was heavily monitored by police enforcing the speed limit to the 40 miles per hour thoroughfare it's now deemed or called that's not? It's still residential. So does anyone have that information?
Jeremy?
Short answer is no. But for our streaming audience, the short answer is no, but that would be a public works question. I could do some research and bring it back to our next meeting. I don't know if Kim might know. Anyway, you want to grab this so they can hear?
I do remember that because actually I've been pulled over on Park Marina, actually. So the Public Works Department does a number of regular traffic studies, and then they have to take the average of the speed that's out there, and then that's like the methodology that's used. And so what they found was that actually, and so I think on Park Marina it could have even gone higher, and they kept it lower. So there is a kind of engineering design process for setting those speed limits, and they get reviewed periodically.
Every time we see that everybody goes faster, right? That's what we do.
Well, if everybody goes faster and there's no accident, if the accident rate is low, then it would be set higher. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive with traffic studies because you study and then sometimes neighbors get upset because the speed limit increases. But until you reach that accident threshold, there's no requirement to reduce. But I can get a little more info too, just on history for next meeting. And the Park Marina corridor study is, I'm told, close to final. We went through a few rounds of iterations with a consultant, but that should be going to council and getting approved here in the next month or two, from what I last heard.
Right. Okay, there was a hand up here. Question, comment? Go ahead, Cameron. Yeah. Green light.
Short answer on that too is not here in that capacity. As a planning commissioner, I ask this question all the time. And Jeremy or Lily, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually what it is, they do a traffic study, and this is really a state law to prevent from having speed traps. And so you take the mean speed, the average speed of the population of the driving public through that particular area. I believe you can do 85% of that number. And if there's a certain high accident threshold that's crossed, you can drop it another 5, and you do it by the increments of 5. So you can't unilaterally drop a speed limit in an area, say down to 25, just because, hey, we'd like to see it there. You've got to be able to do the math, do the actual justification. Otherwise, it's a speed trap. So just let you know that's the formula.
Okay. Rebecca, did you have a question, comment? It could be on any of the material, the background here, of course.
Yeah, I know that phase 4 is where CEQA comes in, but is there anything, you said that your biologist went out there 3 weeks ago. Is there a lot of biology research and biodiversity and everything that's going on before phase 4 of the actual CEQA?
Yeah, we'll be starting that right at the beginning of the process. Dan?
Excellent question. And the short answer is we're starting that right now. So typically in specific plans, you don't do that until you actually start the EIR. But we fast-tracked the biological technical study and the cultural resources technical study, and actually maybe parts of the traffic as well. So we get that information up front to help inform decisions earlier on. So we're really, in essence, we started the CEQA process a month ago.
Oh, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Any other background questions? Yes, sir. Garrett?
Just to piggyback off.
Is the light on? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably got to
Yeah.
bring it closer. To piggyback off on the corridor plan, is there a preliminary document that we could review? I think it'll form a major constraint on this specific plan itself. So I think it would just inform a lot of what we're doing here.
Okay, great question. Jeremy?
There is a draft document. There was a web page devoted to it, but when the city switched over to our new website, some of that got lost. So I'm working on pulling it back up. So there is a draft document out. There was before. So I need to work on getting it to the new website. If in the meantime, I might be able to get a copy of it and send it to the coalition members. So I'll do that when I work on Jocelyn's question as well.
And I just want to quickly add also for folks online, we have a documents page on the project website for this project. So we're going to start adding links to the general plan, to Park Marina Drive corridor study, and other projects that relate as well, just to make it easy to find everything in one place. So we'll work with Jeremy to get that up and posted shortly.
Okay. Any other background questions? I know we threw a lot of information there, but as we say, it's just the tip of the iceberg. As we get further into the process, a lot more information of a technical nature will be forthcoming. We're still at the broad visioning, overall goal setting stage, which will guide the work of those technical studies, but also serve us well as we get more into actual potential land use alternatives and so forth. Okay, Christina, and then Chris after that.
Thanks. One, you're getting together the Park Marina one.
Is the light on?
Yeah, might just be closer.
Green light? Okay.
Could you also include the upcoming construction that might be kicking off in certain ones like Turtle Bay to downtown, so we can be informed on what new projects might be, they've been in the works for a while, but things that are coming up sooner than later to help support.
Okay,
I think Turtle Bay to downtown
go ahead.
starts pretty soon.
Jeremy?
So just to clarify, building permit issuance activity or entitlements or just things that are under construction in downtown? ATP specifically? Okay.
All of the above, it sounds like.
All of the above or mostly ATP? Was I off base at first? Okay.
Okay,
Got it.
all right, thank you. Did you have a hand up also, Chris? Well, if you want to, then turn on the green light. You have to speak into the mic. Remember, we have people online and this is the way they get to hear.
I'm used to these.
Okay,
So I just want to give you an update on what we had done in concert with the city prior to the corridor study. So we spent a year with the city looking at infrastructure, because infrastructure down in our neck of the woods has to be consistent enough to get a balanced development.
Mhm.
So it made sense for us when the lease was over, the ground lease, that we put together a team and went into negotiations, talking with the city about this. And so some of the things we discussed is the boulevard concept, how to slow the traffic down, create areas where there were a couple of roundabouts
Mhm.
in there, and just make room for trails. And part of that is we were looking for a way for the little lake front that goes around to put a part of the trail there on down. And we had an environmental planner. We did some hydrology. So we did some homework prior. It went very well. And we also considered the what we call the road around, using the roundabouts to access what would be Washington Avenue,
Mhm.
taking that traffic, slowing it down again, coming back on Park Marina, thus allowing us more open space next to the water
Mhm.
to get a continuity of what the balance is in there. And I
Okay.
think that that road is important, at least for us to discuss, because I think it gives us
Mhm.
a bigger vision once we get the traffic, basically how it fits with land. And
Right.
we did some flights over it. I've got a drone project I'm working on right now to take a look at that from the air. We got a good hydrology report, so we're ready to talk about this and we're prepared.
Okay, and just to highlight what Dan said about what is a specific plan, there will be a land use element at a more detailed level than a general plan, but just like in a general plan, that will be one of the chapters of the specific plan. There will also be a mobility element highlighting the transportation network, bicycle, walking, pedestrian, as well as automobile and public transit. So all of that will be looked at in much more detail. There'll be an environmental resource element as well, in addition to the required CEQA documents that we have in the state of California. So let's go on to the next part of the process, and that is to review the discussion that we've been having with all of you in the coalition, but also with the broader community. And I mentioned again the community open houses that we had at the Civic Auditorium. Just out of curiosity, how many of all of you in this room attended one or more of those community open houses? Wow, I'm not surprised. Pretty much the whole room. So this is really good because what we like to do is listen to folks, hear what they have to say, write it down, feed it back and check and make sure through this process of back and forth, we ultimately get a fairly accurate and complete picture about the future of the riverfront area here in the city of Redding. So it does say emerging. This is not the final, and it probably won't be final until eventually city council at the very, very end of the process, a year or two from now, ultimately approves the document. But these are all steps through this iterative process of ultimately arriving at a vision statement and what we would say a set of guiding principles. So this is built on all of the outreach we've done so far. We've been saying that over and over again tonight, so you know that we're doing our best to be true to what we heard and to make sure that is reflected in the overall set of vision elements, as we're calling it at this point. We also did incorporate the discussion we had here 2 weeks ago. And at this point, there's 7 broad themes. You have in front of you a handout that we just developed that you can use to follow along as coalition members and community members here that are in attendance. You can comment on this later as we go into the public comment period at the end of this meeting. But these vision elements are very broad, and we're going to go through each of these 7 different areas one by one, and then see if you have additional comments you want to correct, you want to further add to. We know these are words, but words are important in a planning document. They do give guidance and direction for policy making and ultimately future decision making about what happens in this study area. So we're starting with these different elements. There's 7 so far according to our initial content analysis, and they're going to be discussed here, presented one by one, and we'll pause after each one and see as coalition members whether you have additional comments to add, you want to make adjustments to this language. There's no pride of authorship here. We're at the very early stage, but we want to start developing some common understanding of what we envision as a community for the riverfront of City of Redding. So we'll start with healthy and resilient natural environment. And we created essentially 4 broad principles based on what we heard, as you can see illustrated up here. So first of all, celebrating the immense natural beauty of the Sacramento River and the riverfront area to protect critical habitats that support biodiversity to ensure their long-term health, to create opportunities for native fish, animals, and birds to thrive throughout their entire life cycles. And we heard how unique this area is with regard to a diversity of bird species. Just for example, we know this is also an excellent fishery as well, and for all kinds of reasons, that's an important resource to preserve and protect. And then any development and activities that are anywhere near the river and or critical habitat areas, they need to be compatible, complementary, and presenting low or no impact on those important resources. So there are also ways of handling that. So I think instantly when people are thinking about a specific plan that equates to development, that equals negative environmental impact. And we have to ensure that's not the case. That it can be done through good design, through good planning, to allow those setbacks and other controls to make sure that those critical habitats are indeed protected for the long-term health of those ecosystems. So I'm just going to pause there and see if anybody on the coalition would like to add any comments. Maybe there's additional key points. And Dan is going to make notes here. We're also, of course, making a recording of the discussion as well. So we don't want to miss anything. So Michelle, why don't you start us off?
I will. I would suggest that under the second bullet point that you would add the word restore, protect and restore critical habitats.
Good. Yes, indeed. And we would agree with that as a really good catch. Thank you very much. Melissa?
Yeah, I was going to comment a little bit along those lines. I actually, in prep for this, walked Park Marina all of last night and the Rodeo Grounds. And I really think restore or maybe undeveloped, there's a lot of, especially on Park Marina, a lot of asphalt. It's pretty much, we really need a lot more open space there. So I don't know if in there we can add some, I know it's not maybe economically feasible, but like rewilding. I like the word rewild. It's kind of a term used in planning, but add some more open space both there. And I noticed that, I mean, we have the Rodeo Grounds, but there is a lot of gravel area and asphalt. It's hot here. So I want to add that.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Rebecca.
Last time, I suggested bringing in California Department of Fish and Wildlife at an earlier, as early as possible. Is there any talk of that? Because they're the ones that would be able to tell what size the buffer needs to be in what region. Is there any talk of bringing them in at an earlier stage than phase 4 during CEQA?
We will be bringing it in well in advance of phase 4, but yes, we're going to follow up on your suggestion around that. And not only them, but any other key resource agencies that will be reviewing our specific plan, we'll bring them into.
And when can we expect the findings of your biologists?
That's a question for Dan. Do you want to give us that timing?
In the next several weeks, we have a draft report together. We run it by staff for comments and review as well, and then we'll make it public. So it should be probably within 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, there's one more month before the end of this process.
That is an excellent point. So I'm going to make a note to check in with my folks tomorrow morning, but we'll see how we can push that forward as well, or at least get the full mapping data information together for the coalition to review.
Good. All right. Thank you. Any other comments on this item, Garrett?
Yeah, so I just want to bring something up, and this, I think, will thread through a lot of these points.
Okay.
It touches on economic viability, appropriate scale, but a specific plan at times can end up being too specific and stifling development. You brought up that, this is something that doesn't take into account, the development and planning process that will come later. So, it's kind of point 4. And of course, I think that we need to, limit the impact on development, but in a specific plan sense, I don't want to see things being overly restrictive and stifling potential opportunities to take place, in this area. It's important that we allow the process to play out at the planning and development stage, rather than at this preliminary before we have any information or studies to back up some of the stuff that we may be implementing here.
Yeah, no, that's good planning advice in general, because it's really hard to know the future. We can see just in the last 5 years, how rapidly things have changed in our country, in our state, and around the world. And there has to be some ability to update, to refine, and to take a look at what's happening trend-wise, especially economic considerations. New technology has impacts, as well as new understandings about environmental systems. So that's very important consideration. So its general plan is broad. Specific plan is starting to focus more, but even those documents have to have some room for the community to update and make revisions based on current conditions, policies, and rules. Okay, so let's see, what else? Was there another comment on this section, Jocelyn?
I was just going to piggyback off of hers. I feel like you're asking if we can get Fish and Game here at one of these meetings, and no? Okay, because I was going to say, okay, involved in the process.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Now, again, this is still open. We're not going to leave this forever, but just to keep us moving here, we wanted to move to the second one, which is to honor and respect the indigenous community. And this is something critical to the history and culture of the area. Obviously, the tribes have a real big role to play, and we're doing our best to engage them in the way that they want to be engaged. So first of all here, respecting the deep cultural connections to the indigenous communities have to the Redding Riverfront area, to engage them in the land use, habitat protection, recreation, cultural landscape discussions. And these are, again, potentially policy areas that would be embedded in the specific plan to protect the sacred sites and cultural resources. And obviously to do that in a way without revealing their location. That's important to protect those resources, and they will give us guidance on how best to do that. And to maintain the connections they have and access to the land, the river, and the animals of the ecosystem that are critical to their culture. And then more opportunities for indigenous-run cultural centers and spaces, so they have an economic stake in whatever happens in this Riverfront specific plan area as well. Do you have any comments, any additions you'd like to make on this particular element? Okay.
To honor the indigenous people here locally, in addition to bringing more awareness. And
okay.
So I think that final bullet point is actually a huge one to actually
highlight.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Jocelyn. Again, just want to remind folks to use the mic because we have the online audience, and the audio is critical for them to hear and to feel equal in the discussion. Okay. All right. Next one is about economic viability, thriving arts, culture, and entertainment venues. So we have 3 points here. One is to allow for a range of activities, events, and programs through multifaceted, flexible venues. And we think that's something we heard a lot in the community discussion. Ensuring that any new venues and destinations are scaled and programmed to address local and visitor desires while also being economically viable, ensuring their long-term success. I recall some of those comments directly coming out of our first coalition meeting, and hopefully the right terms there. And then finally, supporting the viability and success of the Redding Rodeo as a key part of the unique history and identity of Redding. So again, these are broad principles. It doesn't say how we're going to achieve that, but we heard that repeatedly throughout the meetings we've had so far, that the rodeo is a critical part of the history and culture of this area. Any comments on this section? Okay, Michelle.
wondering if we shouldn't mention or have a bullet point that says economically viable to support maintenance and repairs of the amenities.
Over time, yeah, it's not just what can happen in the next 5 years, but we know that these kinds of facilities have to be kept up to date and modernized to fit the times and the expectations of artists and other actors who are going to be coming in to use these facilities. Okay. Other comments? Rebecca?
I noticed in the public comments that maybe one or two comments actually even mentioned the moving of the Redding Rodeo. I absolutely agree that the Redding Rodeo is incredibly important. It's kind of putting Redding on the map, really. So we definitely need to support that. But what do the people involved with the Redding Rodeo, how would they feel about relocating?
Well, let me turn to those people. Darren is right here. Go ahead.
We've been there 75 years. We love it and we want to stay.
Okay.
And we really appreciate the comments because not only did you listen to the community as a whole in that statement, but also us at the last meeting. So we do appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cameron?
Speaking on behalf as well with the Asphalt Cowboys, while we're a much smaller footprint than the Redding Rodeo Association and the arena, critical part for us, and we put on several of the most attended events in Redding. Certainly the top two, and I think 3 of the 4 of the top 10. And we do about 15 events throughout the year. And some of our largest ones and the largest community events are in the downtown area, like Redding area. They're right in the heart of Redding. For us, from a logistical standpoint, really doing that from a non-central location creates all kinds of logistical issues. There's been discussion, hey, when you guys were down in Anderson, up Shasta Lake, out in, east of town, we wouldn't be able to put on a downtown pancake breakfast for 10,000 people if we were not centrally located, nor barbecue in the park, some of these others. So certainly for us, we're willing to work within the boundaries, but keeping that central location for the Cowboys is certainly a big deal to us. And we need to make sure too, we're right next to or nearby with the Rodeo Association to help them in any way we may have to.
So Cameron, how many pancakes do you actually make during that festival?
It's about 27,000 was my number. So we served just shy of 10.
Okay.
So, but I think it was about 2.7 pancakes per person. We're only supposed to give out 2, but a lot of my guys, I want another pancake.
Push it a little bit.
I try, so.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Thank you. Julie.
I would just like to flesh out just a little bit because, there was one comment about their civic being a failed proposition where there might have been a moment in time where probably the majority of Redding considered that to be true. I would vociferously argue that's not the truth today. And that if there's some language in here that if it's appropriate to flesh out what exactly economically viable means as far as not just like to Michelle's point about, sufficient for maintenance and upkeep of the assets that are here, but also in recognition of the economic impact that those venues drive because they are significant economic drivers in our community that I'm not sure anybody, that the majority of Redding actually really understands how much economy the rodeo brings to the community, the auditorium brings to the community, and it's not a small measure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing to highlight because everybody's not in those businesses to know how they work and what their ultimate impact is, as well as secondary and tertiary impacts. They build a good part of the Redding local and regional economy. Okay, Jocelyn?
I have kind of a question for everybody here. Is anyone involved at all or heavily with Cool April Nights, for example?
What is it called?
Group, Cool April Nights. It's
Nights.
kind of actually a week-long thing. It's a major car show that happens on the grounds here that brings a lot of between 10 and 15,000 people from out of town for a week to 2 weeks. that they're bringing classic cars. They're parking all through the parking at the Civic. I know last week I had mentioned a parking garage there that I mean, during like events, we could charge $1 or whatever for parking that's going to pay for itself over time. But then we have a lot of people with classic cars that can't park their cars in the sun. They can't park. So again, a parking garage, then all of a sudden you have shade for those cars that people could just scale through and walk. But it's just an idea. But the Cool April Nights is another huge driver that brings a lot of people down there that, and I actually wanted and made the suggestion of moving because the parade used to be downtown along California, and I actually proposed to a few people to move it so that it's like California down through Park Marina and back to the Civic Center, because there's so much land along Park Marina that how cool would it be if people are along the river and actually seeing these cars instead of driving them across Hilltop where you can't see half the cars anyway because it's like 6 lanes across, so people lose it, as opposed to when it was downtown right here, it was 3 lanes across and it was so like small town wonderful feel, and now with it across. So anyway, it's just something that it's also a big event that Park Marina is impactful for, and I think that you guys need to also be talking with the people who are in charge of Cool April Nights and organizing that.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. We'll follow up on that. Okay, we'll have the public comment after this discussion. Sorry. Go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, just to follow up, I know the Rodeo Association and the Asphalt Cowboys, we do meet together with Cool April Nights, and we cook breakfast for them as well, Saturday and Sunday.
Pancakes?
Less pancakes, yeah, same pancakes, but less of them. But yeah, I know certainly they have a huge interest in terms of the viability is that of the Civic Center in the area to continue to be their main location for the event. And yeah, in terms of, I can't speak with regards to why the cruise moved or is no longer downtown, although I do know Redding Christmas Parade used to be held on Park Marina before it was moved downtown years ago. So,
all right, excellent, great. Let's see, Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought I'd piggyback kind of off what Julie was saying. Clearly the Civic has become a major venue for a number of events over, especially the last, I'd say 5 years, really since the changes took place. And I'd be curious to see if there's a similar situation going on with the Rodeo Grounds. And I think Barron could speak more, or someone could speak more to what the city requires and, for the leases and things like that. But I mean, opening that venue up and allowing more to take place, I don't know the restrictions or anything, but perhaps it's a similar situation. It feels like, I mean, we really turned the corner with the Civic. There might be something there, the Rodeo Grounds.
Yeah, Barron, did you want to address that at all?
Not sure I understood the question.
Basically, there's just like restrictions on you or other tenants to make it a venue that is more utilized, in the sense of, a venue that brings more.
What is there anything holding back the potential expansion?
Sure, I think we've come a long ways, and I think Julie can speak to this as well. In the last 5 years of working together and all of us together on the events that we want to throw in that area. As we modernize and move forward with the Rodeo Grounds, I think those things will get bigger and better. But I think Julie was being pretty nice when saying that that Advanced Redding hasn't changed the outlook of the Redding Civic from what it was 10 years ago. So we definitely need to applaud them where they've taken the Civic from there to today. But as far as the Rodeo Grounds, I think we work well together on parking and other issues that go on down there to have the events that we want to have. But as we modernize the Redding Rodeo, do other things, other things happen? I'm sure they will.
All right. Very good. All right. Rebecca?
Our concern with that is the lighting, the noise. Like you mentioned, there's 100, I mentioned before 196 species and just birds alone, and there's fish, and so that area is very, very sensitive. And so our concern would just be that not for it to become something crazy where there's noise and light going on 24/7.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very sensitive to that.
We can certainly look at the where best practices are concerned, environmental design that protects those species and still allows for these active uses. We can point to examples of where that's happened, but those are consistent with the other principles. So you can't just take one of the 7 areas in isolation. We have to look at all 7 of those together. Julie?
And I just want to, because some of the public comment across this process is similar to what was heard when there was the unsolicited offer that came before City Council a while back. And I think there's some fear and concern around like somebody coming in and building something big and crazy, which I understand why there would be that concern. But back to the economic viability, like Redding is still it's a city, but it's still kind of a rural city. And I know for our draw, 46% of the people that come to the events across the things that we do are local. Mm-hmm. I think I said that backwards, 64%, not 46. Okay. In conversations with Lindsay from Turtle Bay, it's that same percentage for Garden of Lights. So, while it's a tension. I'm really just wanting to speak in a broader sense to the community and to the other members of the panel that we also don't want to see something that's outsized for where we are, because that doesn't serve the natural habitats. It doesn't serve the local indigenous peoples. It doesn't serve us in a business model. So, measured, thoughtful, that's our approach to all of it, is just maximizing what we have in smart ways.
So maybe we can add a principle here that talks about in concert with while protecting the environmental qualities and resources of the area. And again, those don't have to be in opposition to each other, but it just makes it clear that we're trying to resolve those 2 points. And that's what planning is all about, is to take a lot of different ideas and try to assemble them in a way that it creates a complete whole, and one that's overall consistent with our values and overall vision. Baron? Yeah.
So just to capture that a little bit, a few years back, we put in almost $250,000 in lights with a smaller footprint and less bleed over. So you can take away from not shining light into those areas as much as we did before. So that's really helped out that particular area anyway. Yeah. No, and there's great advances in terms of architecture, design, construction, the use of materials, bird-friendly glass and other buildings, materials like that also contribute to the viability of the natural species. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. And I have a question as well. So I wanted to piggyback. I guess everybody's piggybacking on things this afternoon. Yeah, there's a lot of echo, which is probably good. But Advanced Redding and the rodeo and all of the people that are managing these things currently right now, I know there's some of the representatives here, but I hope they're really a part of especially the parking and the traffic issue. Because if anybody can speak to what happens down there on a big event, it's going to be those people, and so that's probably important. The question I have is, and maybe I'm jumping too hard, ahead, is what new venues are possible down there? Like what discussions have been had? I mean, I've been inside the convention center. I know some people don't like its physical appearance. I love it. I think it's quirky and whatever. But I mean, are we talking about facilities down the river that are going to be rivaling that size, or what are we talking? What things have been kind of kicking around?
There's nothing on the table from our standpoint. I've been stressing this is starting with a blank canvas. We're building this together with the community.
That's what I was kind of curious about. The other thing is, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is in terms of where fly fishermen go, I don't know where the hot spots on the river are, but to the extent that the hot spots on the river are in these places, I'm curious as to what restrictions there are on, people doing tours in that location, how that might impact, what actually happens, because it's a big driver in the economy.
Mhm.
So I just, that's something that ought to be, part of the concept too.
Right. Of course, good fishermen never say where they go to fish, right? That's kind of.
That's
we keep that a
classified.
secret. But, yeah. But, okay, Terry.
So there are hotspots, which is why pretty much the rodeo grounds at that boat launch through the 44 bridge are hot fishing areas. And then it laxes from there down past Cypress. So the fishing right there at the lake area below 44 is not necessarily a hotspot for fishing.
Mhm.
But that upper section up to and even past the boat launch are definitely hotspots.
Okay. All right.
As part of the planning, or is it helpful to fly fishermen if there are additional points of entry into the river that are taken into consideration downriver on Park Marina, or is it fairly easy to access? Should the development include, those types of access issues?
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of goes to the boat launch meetings we had a few months ago with the city. The Park Marina boat launch can help a few people, but the parking there just isn't conducive for, say, 20 boats to be sent out there. Maybe 10, 15. So it can be broken up, and it probably would be good to have a much larger boat launch on Park Marina to ease the stress of the rodeo grounds.
On the southern part of Park Marina, I've seen some people getting ready to go out fly fishing, and they were scrambling over all sorts of, things that were kind of obstructing their way to get to the actual river. So I guess I'm just pointing out that it might be, because it's a big part of, the tourism industry up here.
Yeah.
To make sure that access to the river isn't hindered by this.
Mhm.
I know that there's been a lot of comments about keeping the integrity and the beauty of the river. And to me, that's something that if we take that into account, I'm not talking about building like massive, platforms for people to fish off of, but access points where people can get into the river that make it part of like the usefulness.
Well, I think it goes to how you design these recreational activities so that they don't pose a threat or a severe negative impact to the very thing people are coming to enjoy. So this debate will never go away, but there are ways to handle those things sensitively, and that's what we aim to do here with a set of guidelines, rules, and other policies within a specific plan that would guide those the development and the design of those facilities. Okay, we're going to handle the coalition comments first, then we'll have a public comment here period coming in, if you don't mind, sir. And we have seven vision elements. We have 4 more we'd like to review with all of you here on the coalition. So speaking of which, this one is about appropriate scale. So I think it's clear that we heard that we're not talking about creating even mid-rise or high-rise development here. We haven't heard any of those conversations within the community people that we've talked to, including the several hundred that attended the open houses back at the Civic. So ensuring that the new buildings and uses reflect the scale and character of Redding, that these destinations are safe, well-lit, easy to access, and ADA accessible. That the northern riverfront could be different from the southern. I think they are 2 different or distinct sub-areas. We've talked about this. Creating vibrant and active public uses that support local and visitor users. Identify ways to maintain or reduce developed site coverage. Again, that would include some type of environmental restoration along the way. Southern riverfront, concentrating the commercial restaurants and mixed-use projects, if they are to occur, would be along Park Marina Drive. consider how development on Park Marina Drive will impact existing traffic, and then creating opportunities for private recreation and amenities on or next to the quarry pond. So those are, again, comments we've heard through this process so far. So help us modify, adjust, add to if we're missing something important here on this item. Let's see, Michelle and then Jocelyn, go ahead.
Mixed use development by its nature includes housing.
It could, yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes. And in our community, it pretty much
Right.
does. But there seems to be reoccurring comments provided to us in writing and that we heard our last meeting, that there is not a lot of support for housing.
Now remember, mixed
far
use
as
could be office as well as retail or housing and retail. And there's
Right.
mixed use implies a lot of different combinations.
But I just wanted to make sure that you guys are hearing that
Limited.
there is concern about housing developments in these corridors.
In the southern portion in particular, or everywhere?
I would say with this whole, both northern and southern.
Within the whole
corridors.
study area. Okay, we'll make a note of that. Comments? Well, let's see. Jocelyn was up next, and then Melissa.
I agree. I hear you, but I'm not sure that the community understands that a lot of that is wetland and it's not a housing appropriate land, and a lot of it is private. It's also not housing appropriate land. And what are we going to do? Build houses for people to have houses right on the river? You know what I mean? Like this is a river corridor that the community as a whole should enjoy. So I'm not saying that we don't need housing. However, I think people aren't aware of the exact locations that we're talking about. I want to speak to the ADA accessible component because the sidewalks along Park Marina, along the residences are not ADA compliant. They're like a foot tall. And so anyone stepping off of those is liable to break an ankle. And I've had 3 ankle reconstructive surgeries. So, and I live right there. So I know, I am not only a Crucis Track resident, I run a business out of my home. And so I have people of all ages, including elderly individuals who step on those sidewalks. And I'm terrified that they are going to fall and break their neck because the sidewalks are so high. So that's something that needs to be looked at and addressed, because I know that it's for the river being so high and to protect the houses, but we also need to figure out how to make those sidewalks ADA compliant.
And that's very feasible to do. We can make that happen. Melissa?
Yeah, I just want to add that I think it was one of the comments, one of the concerns about the Southern Riverfront and Park Marina, that it's privately owned. And then that last bullet says create opportunities for private recreation. I just want to maybe public as well.
Public and private.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, makes sense. That's a good catch. Okay. Was there another hand up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So by nature,
Chris.
recreation is quite inclusive. I mean, you can't divide it up into 2 things. I mean, recreation and tourism is exclusively for populations of all, diversities.
All ages, all abilities.
The other thing is, and my comments that I spoke with, come on over.
Okay.
Anyway, that when I spoke with you, that a certain amount of housing that is very well done, that balances, probably would enhance the off-season tourism with the restaurants. And we know this because we've done a study in Napa. And I've talked to 2 or 3 restaurateurs in Napa. And during the winter, when things slow down, they need local, consistent input to the restaurants. And so I plan on taking a good look at that in a couple places down there, because I think it's warranted and it feeds into off season. The assumption is that Redding's one way all year. That is not true.
Okay, so you're saying there are
There are
selected
places.
areas where housing may be
Could fit.
desirable and
When we
appropriate.
had our interview,
Yeah.
we talked about that.
Okay.
And, I want to reiterate it that if you look at Redding carefully, it does have seasons, and people have a tendency certain part of the year to just go on by.
Okay. Walk on
Okay?
by.
And
That's
we
a
have
song.
to prepare for that. We have to be realistic, and we have to, understand about balance. I keep bringing that up.
I think
Okay.
it's about scale when you
Yeah.
talk about housing.
Yeah.
And that's my concern. And when there was a developer had put an offer on the table to acquire the convention center area there, or a large part of it, there was a great fear amongst the community that it was going to be affordable housing, like we were seeing downtown, which would have been
Yeah, Michelle, I want to reiterate too, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking
Okay.
about very tastefully, first class, that gets people to want to live in the area around there
Mhm.
to help with off season.
Okay, good.
Just
Thank you.
logic.
All right, Cameron?
Yeah, and I just wanted, I mean, I think there's a big difference with regards to housing on the northern versus southern areas. And, we deal with it all the time. Everybody hears about the airport concept where you have an airport, we've got a couple here in town, and this happens, and people move in around the airport after it's existing and then complain about the noise and everything with regards to the airport. We've got an airport down there. We know it. It's there. I mean, we have 4th of July, cool April nights. A lot of those engines are awfully loud. We've got the rodeo, but all kinds of different events and things that occur. I think that's one of those we want to be cautious. Do we want to put housing around the airport, so to speak, down in the north, at least on the northern riverfront area? I think that's something that would have a lot of implications regarding what we could do down there, and then also what the feasibility would be. And it may not be automatic, but boy, in 3, 5, 10 years, we're probably going to start hearing the complaints, but the fireworks, the noise, the events, etc. So I think it's
Yeah.
worth taking into account.
Well, this is what we try to do in planning in general plans and specific plans, is ensure land use compatibility. In fact, that was the very first case in the United States in 1925. It was a case of somebody wanted to put a junkyard next to a residential neighborhood, and that led to Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty, and the Supreme Court ruled that the city has the right to zone land in the interest of public safety, health, and welfare. And that set up the basis for zoning law 100 years later.
And if I may as well, and Lily, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I believe in the current general plan draft, this has been discussed, there is an element in there. I believe there are some even noise exceptions currently in the noise element with regards to the Civic Rodeo Grounds area.
I don't know. Jeremy, can you address that?
It's only this.
Lily and I are giving each other quizzical looks, so I'll have to look at the noise element in detail, Cameron,
Okay.
and see. I would just add one more additional comment on the housing. I think housing came up primarily in the northern riverfront area at first, and I just remind this group that was largely connected to the Surplus Land Act discussion, right? As I recall, that the state requires when a city surpluses land that it first be considered for, I think, a period of 60 days. Maybe don't quote me on that. We'd have to talk to our city attorney for affordable housing projects, right? So that's where a lot of that discussion came in, was the idea of public property being surplused, and then perhaps the fear or the concern that could result in an affordable housing project by the way state law works. So I won't muddy the waters anymore, but if we want to get more detail on that, I'm happy to bring back something more at our next meeting too.
Okay. I think clearly this whole topic, appropriate scale and use, leaves a lot to be developed and defined. And it's obviously an important issue when we talk about what we've heard. And we're talking about this riverfront resource. So we have 3 more areas. I want to make sure we give attention to that. Let's go to Todd, who hasn't spoken yet, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I just want to, on the housing issue on the southern riverfront, I mean, there's already, I don't know how many residents you have down there now, but hundreds of residents in that area. So I think there's opportunities, which I know, I don't want to put words into Chris's mouth, but opportunities for that to be redeveloped, which you just mentioned, and new housing there. I mean, it's a premium place to live. And coming back to the economic viability, if that can help the overall project and scope be done, I think that's important. But also at the same time, it's private property, so we don't want to box them in with this specific plan that's going to limit the ability for him and whatever developer he chooses to partner with maximize
Mhm.
on that property.
So again, finding that right balance seems like that's at the core of your comments here. Melissa?
Just a quick one. Kind of getting involved with this project. I really appreciate public lands, and I know that the city owns the area that's civic and the rodeo grounds. I just would love to have them remain public, and so maybe potential easements on there, so we don't privatize them. And
Okay.
I don't know where that's appropriate to put this discussion or not, but I want
Okay,
to
so
throw
that
it
would
out
be
there.
that's a policy. It'd be a tool that could be used to help achieve the vision the community decides is the right thing ultimately. Okay, going on to world-class recreation and activities. We heard a lot of discussion about the value of this specific plan area with regard to opportunities for boating, fishing, kayaking, et cetera, outdoor activities, supports nature, gets people out there, and you build a body of appreciators that will then help to support the policies of environmental restoration and preservation. Activities that support health and well-being, that leverage the riverfront as a base camp for outdoor enthusiasts visiting the region's outdoor destinations. That certainly has come up, and Redding has clearly economic potential that's untapped in this area. Focusing low-impact activities within public areas and sensitive habitats, and then maybe more intense activities, again, relatively speaking, within private outdoor spaces and the quarry pond. So seems to be maybe a way to differentiate these uses and where they might be most appropriately located. So any comments on this section overall? Hopefully we captured things accurately there. Oh, okay, Todd?
This might be a little bit out of scope, but I wanted to go on record to be able to say this because it's come up a lot in conversations with my friends, up in Bend and a lot of other cities in the river itself, which again is out of the scope of the city's jurisdiction. There's actually like water features, and this could be something that's off channel. I know there's sensitivities to this, but being able to create like a feature in the river, which again, I know the city's not going to be the ones to do that, but something for like the kayakers and surfing and stuff like that. It probably doesn't fit within the specific plan, but I think it's worth mentioning for something to just plant a seed for
Okay.
a potential future use of like an actual in-water feature.
Is there a precedent project you would point us to as an example so we can better understand?
There's one in Bend, and I believe it's actually in the Deschutes River. So, I mean, if it can happen in the Deschutes, it could probably happen in the Sacramento. But again, I know that's federal waters of the U.S., and there's other issues there that would have to be dealt with. But I think it's Bend is the one that comes to mind. It's close to the Mill District. I don't exactly know the location. I'm sure someone here does, but I know a lot of people. In Reno. So it's happening, throughout the West specifically. It really enables people to maximize the use of the actual water itself.
You mean like a kayak course?
Not even a course, but just like a ripple, like a wave in the actual water itself.
Okay.
But many communities are creating whitewater kayak courses.
Yeah, Oklahoma City has one.
That are very popular. They're attractions. They're Olympic competitions in some of these. So I was going to bring that up too. So I'm glad that you did.
Spokane River, we've done some work up there. They have a similar feature. Truckee River in the Reno Tahoe area also. All right. Connected spaces. Hang with me. We're almost through the wheel here. Expanding opportunities for people to connect to the natural areas and the river itself. Enhancing vehicle, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian connections. We heard about that just as Dan went through the background data. We know from the community comments so far, the issues of pedestrian safety, traffic speeds. So we're definitely trying to address this here and what the positive direction is or outcome is that you're looking for. Hopefully you can help us tweak the language. That is between neighborhoods, the specific plan area, and between major destinations. Identifying ways to connect the northern and southern riverfronts, especially with the 44 bisecting there. We know Dan pointed that out in his earlier presentation. And then where are the appropriate locations for parking, for strategies that manage future activities, bicycle use, and other kinds of auto and vehicle transportation. So the idea here is connectivity. Anything to add, anything missing that you want to help us point out? Christina?
Yeah, a couple of things. In my line of work, we usually prioritize what is listed first. So when you're going enhanced vehicle, transit,
Okay.
bicycle, pedestrian connections, I think for this location that is a livable space, there's people, or that's their front yards. If we could work on prioritizing pedestrian and bicycle transit, and yes, vehicle, but
Non-auto
yeah,
transportation.
it's just, how we read it usually is how it gets prioritized.
Mhm.
The other thing with this being sort of the specific plan, but when I see the word identify ways or identify parking locations, it makes me think that we're going to be developing projects and solutions and something like this versus supporting ways to reconnect the northern and southern riverfronts currently bisected, which would sort of be an ongoing but independent effort, probably not something that would come out specifically from the Riverfront Specific Plan, but we would be wanting to support that, or instead of identifying parking locations, perhaps, we're ensuring adequate parking locations, type and
Right.
support the development of
Ensure
management
yeah.
strategies to
I catch
ensure.
that direction. That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it feels like we're going to be coming up with projects.
Yeah. It's not like we need to assess the parking demand before we start looking for more parking. How much, I think that's what you're saying. Ensure that we have adequate parking, not to just assume we
if
need
the
more.
outcome of this is going to be specific projects
No.
for parking locations, then you just be careful with that language.
It may be about identifying parking requirements, not necessarily actually creating parking lots or parking garages. 'Cause
Yeah.
we're not creating a development scheme. We are setting the rules for future
Correct.
developers, landowners, city, and other actors to do the right thing.
Exactly.
In the right place.
Yep, that was my point. So changing the language instead of identifying, we're either going to be supporting the development of those policies to ensure that we have adequate management
Right.
strategies.
That's the right direction.
Mhm.
Yes, good. Thank you. Melissa? No, it won't work otherwise. Sorry. Yeah. No, we went through a lot of trouble to make the audio work, so.
Yeah, no, that's just going up to the third bullet, the same thing. Just say connect the northern and southern riverfronts currently. Like be firm because actually that's great for the economy, really. If you have the Northern River Trail, the Sacramento River Trail connected from Turtle Bay all the way down Park Marina, connecting to Pond, putting another bridge, that actually, and upgrading the motel on Park Marina, you have a lot of foot traffic and people coming from the Sheridan, coming over safely, recreating, going to shops and stuff like that. So it's just, and plus I'd love to use it, but it's really important that we connect that and safely, because that's prohibiting. And that would create, actually, that would calm the traffic. Really, I think if you have people staying over there, walking there and to and from. So just put connect. Let's do it.
Yeah. There's also the principle of park once and utilize then the other non-auto oriented transportation to get to where you want to go. That would have a lessening effect on the traffic impacts. Yeah, good. Any other comments here, Cameron and Todd?
And just briefly, I mean, I certainly think we need to be looking at specifically pedestrian connection and how people are able to walk down there once they get to those areas. I just want to make sure that vehicular and parking are not lost in the discussion. We are, especially the Northern Riverfront area, talking about an area that has several of many events throughout the year that have thousands and thousands of people that attend, not just locally, but within the county and then even regionally, and also from a tourism perspective on the southern end. They're not going to be able to get there just by, they're going to show up by walking or biking. They're going to drive down, have to park nearby at least somewhat.
Yeah.
Obviously we can't put 10,000 vehicles stacked up in a small spot. They are going to be spread out. And I think we need to discuss how people get to where they want to go from there. But we need to make sure if we don't have a way for them to come down and bring their vehicles there in the first place, which most 90+% are going to have to do, just realistically. I just want to make sure that that's available and that also doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
Well, and I think like Christina said earlier, ensuring that we have adequate parking to serve the venues that are identified as possibilities in this specific plan is the performance goal that we're trying to establish here. Let's see, Todd?
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about with vehicle traffic is what feasibility we can work on with this specific plan for another bridge across the Sacramento River on the north side, like to potentially connect to North Market Street. I don't exactly know how that would all work. I know it's come up. I think it came up last meeting, and it's definitely come up with a lot of conversations I've had. So it doesn't have to be a massive overpass, but something to get people across the Sacramento River on the north side.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, Dan's making notes here. We're going to wordsmith this and come up with another iteration of this vision framework, and we'll get it 2 or 3 more times before the end of this coalition process. So we'll refine it. It'll get better, hopefully more reflective of the nuances that you want to put in there. So let's see, one more area to go. And then Jocelyn, yeah, go ahead.
Just to highlight, because I fully understand, yes, vehicles, we can't get away from that. They're there. But when we use language like folks are going to have to drive, the goal would be that they don't, right? You don't have to drive. So ensuring we have facilities where it's not a requirement for those that either can't, don't want to, don't have access to a vehicle, live there. So just
as long as there are alternatives.
It will be there. Correct. You can drive, but you wouldn't have to as your only means of access. Right?
Okay. It's a nuance. So we have to ensure there are other means of getting to where you want to go.
Yeah.
The complete streets.
All the way.
Look, we wrote a book on that very subject, so I'm with you on that. Okay, Jocelyn.
In terms of connected spaces, for example, I'm going to use the old Cinemark building because I use it a lot. I used to work there. It's an amazing space. So we have Turtle Bay on the other side of 44. Like in a beautiful, perfect world, I would love to see another fun education space for families and children that like connects over to the Cinemark building where we're connecting to the river and utilizing, I mean, the superintendent from Shasta Charter, I'm actually a vendor for him, but he teaches his students in the park there to learn to fly fish and different things, and that could be an amazing way where you're connecting both ends of this corridor, using it for education or arts education or something like that. So sure. I just wanted to throw a plug for education. I'm also a full-time teacher, so anything that we can do to bring kids to that area and connect that land that way, I think is also a wonderful use.
Okay, very good. And hopefully it's not so far away the families could walk. They don't have to drive. Right. It was good to Christina's point that if there's that internal connectivity within the specific plan area, that's going to help reduce the overall auto traffic and so on. Okay, last one, memorable and vibrant places. And how do we make it safe, visible, welcoming, walkable, public spaces for the community to share, including gardens, dog parks, pocket parks, public art, create development regulations, design guidelines, and implementation strategies that are tailored specifically to the riverfront here in Redding, not anywhere else. Leverage the current specific plan and community process to analyze the economic feasibility of a range of private projects, new development, recreation, and identify public investment costs and grant funding opportunities, such as for ecosystem restoration, open space enhancements, infrastructure, and recreation. So again, these are all things that we've heard from our various meetings. Have we left anything out? Is this reflective of what the coalition wants to see here in this vision framework? Michelle.
I think that's one thing that's missing is venues,
Venues.
the term venue, which would be a, memorable and vibrant place, either for the rodeo grounds or the civic.
Okay.
And also, I haven't seen, although it was brought up frequently by the public, I haven't seen specific mention of gathering places.
Okay.
I guess you could say like community gardens, but I'm almost thinking
Assembly
somewhat
areas.
larger, reminiscent of European plazas.
Of which?
European plazas.
Okay.
Where you can get a large group of people there to watch our local World Cup superstar. Everyone go in there and view the World Cup match, those kind of community events.
Gathering community.
And I'm sure that the space exists now. It just hasn't been utilized for that.
And it may need design enhancements to facilitate that. That's a great point. Yeah. And you mentioned European cities having those type of spaces. Yeah, we can certainly learn from that. Okay. We're almost ready to turn to our community members here for public comment. Jocelyn?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that, I didn't really see anywhere where, because I know that I mentioned like an amphitheater in the park, and I saw it also mentioned in several, having a space where we can have, because I know that we do concerts in the grass in front of the Civic Center and different things like that, but I think the community is wanting more of a in the shade, in the park, under the trees, next to the river, enjoying the cool, that kind of setting. And Brit festivals in Jacksonville, I interned for them. I mean, that is a wonderful example.
I'm envisioning that space. It would be nice to be there right
it's
now.
Beautiful. It's
Relaxing.
an open amphitheater just with the hill, but I mean,
Yeah.
we don't down there. We don't exactly have a hill, but
Okay.
but having an amphitheater and a venue that brings the community together to enjoy the nature
Yeah.
that's there, and with
Being
an
a
event
com-
of some sort.
Yeah, being a community. Okay, fantastic. So that's, okay. Let's see. Julie and then Todd.
This is more just a procedure question. Because as Jeremy pointed out, a lot of the concerns before when the unsolicited offer came forward, because what was being proposed would trigger the Surplus Land Act, was around affordable housing. So there was clearly at that time, and I think the current public comment echoes it, a resistance in the community to have accessible housing. Well, housing of any kind, actually, in the northern section of the riverfront. People weren't exactly thrilled about the idea of $1 million mansions being built there either. But specific to this document, is there a way to preemptively address some of the constraints that are brought on to municipalities from the Surplus Land Act, or at least attempt to begin to guide the conversation, even if you can't circumvent it at all? Because I do believe the council member who made the motion to move us to this process in this larger discussion was trying to attempt to establish some guidelines around, like if we could get some language in the document that helped us move that conversation forward, even just a defining of what the Surplus Land Act means in a public document, that then also references then what the city's responsibility is in response to that. Because that surplus word triggered a lot of fear, that not a lot of understanding that surplus is just a government word for how it redisposes its assets.
Okay.
So if there's some kind of definition section or things of that nature, just in the challenges or things that this document has to take in consideration specific to the Surplus Land Act and the Northern Riverfront property, I think that would be helpful to the community in the future.
Point taken. We'll need to research that, get some legal advice on what the interpretations have been around that and what the city can or cannot do in relation to that piece of legislation.
The good news is, from a state level, though, there is a lot of movement from even bigger cities on the Surplus Land Act, because a lot of big cities have money into large venues, and so they're also worried about the Surplus Land Act. And so we're hearing that, that down the road, there could be changes in the Surplus Land Act to eliminate some of those, as long as it stays the same use and stays within the city. So we'll see how that goes, but we're hoping for the best.
Okay, we'll definitely get some research on that subject. Todd, and then we'll go and Garrett, and then we'll turn to public comments.
There's a lot of conversation here and at other public meetings about, public spaces and all these public amenities and assets. Unfortunately, they don't pay for themselves. I mean, the city does a tremendous job. They don't directly pay for themselves. The city does a great job getting grants and being able to support new projects, but I think there could be a potential conversation about, if the Northern Riverfront area stays public, sustainable ways to fund that area moving forward, whether it's a business improvement district or something that kind of redirects those funds. I mean, the $3.5 million+ that the Civic brought in just during the summer, that goes into the general fund, which supports all of us, all the things, public safety, everything. But if there was maybe a potential mechanism to reinvest that into the specific area, I might be getting too specific, but some type of sustainable funding mechanism.
Yeah, there'd be an implementation tool that we might want to look at, like a special tax increment financing district, but we can't really do it that old way because redevelopment doesn't exist anymore, but some other techniques could be there to replace that. There are workarounds that, and you mentioned a business improvement district, for example, as another tool. Maybe that could be something looked at here. Let's see, is there one more hand up, Garrett, and then we will go to public comment.
Yeah, while we had Lily here, I just wanted to, and on the housing subject, I wanted to ask if this area had been addressed in the housing element in the general plan at all.
Okay. Lily or Jeremy, go ahead.
The area in general, I know, I mean, we're getting to the point where the general plan is going to the city, and the housing element's a huge part of that. So I was just wondering if this area had been addressed or utilized to, cover some of the requirements in there.
Housing, required housing allocation.
Yeah.
Addressing that in the general plan, how our approach.
Is that on?
Yes.
Okay.
Our approach to the general plan wasn't to change any land uses. And so we have not added housing areas or changing commercial to residential. So really is our real focus has been to really downsize the city, particularly our sphere of influence area, which means, we have city boundaries and we have areas that we influence. And so because just to support what we have today, we can't do it. And so we don't want to reach out too far. So we're actually shrinking our area, but the concept was not to change our land uses at this time.
Okay. All right. We're collecting the comment cards, and Jen or one of the planning staff, if you want to bring those up, we'll go through that here in just a moment. Just to wrap it up, again, this was version 1.0. We're going to come back to you with a modified version based on all your comments here this evening. So we'll have another version to look at and refine and further perfect as a product of the coalition meeting process. So we are going to go to public comments now. If we would like to ask you to come to the podium, we have a 3-minute timer that Jen will be managing there, just so we can keep this to a manageable level. And I'll call the names out, and then you all can get a chance to comment up here. We'd ask you to come to the podium where we can get you in the microphone and be sure to transmit that, online. Okay. So with that, let's see. I need help. Okay, the first one.
Marjorie Cantrell.
Okay. You can call it. Okay, go ahead, please.
My name is Marge Cantrell. My parents moved me here in December of 1946, so I've probably been here longer than most of you. First of all, I would like you to enjoy Redding, but when you move here, don't try to change it to what you left. In answer to some of the things that have been brought up today, the northern riverfront section is owned by the public, thanks to Frances Kutris, Chris's grandmother. It's held for the public to enjoy. If the Civic Auditorium is not retained, the Turtle Bay area should be held as either open area, the Rodeo Grounds, the Asphalt Cowboys, parking, and public use. If you need to change the name, make it Turtle Bay Park or Caldwell Park East. Preserve the Posse Grounds. Preserve the Aqua Golf on Park Marina Drive, Chris, please. This is a buffered area and it should never be declared surplus property. I knew that was going to come up again. As long as the city of Redding owns and holds large parcels of property outside the city limits, this cannot be declared public property. This was given to the people of the city of Redding to enjoy. About the boat area, boat ramp area, the fishing is good all the way past Riverview Golf and Country Club. The other place to put in your boat is on Bonneview. They increased that boat ramp area and has a huge parking lot. And I've been using the Rodeo Grounds boat ramp since the early 1950s. So if you have questions about any area of Redding, I can probably tell you. I am pleased to see so many continue to turn out. The city council in the past has given away a lot of the public-owned property that dealt with our history, the Indian baskets and displays that we had at Carter House. Some of the council members pushed the big league dreams and then went to work for them. We had city managers that wanted to get rid of all the car lots in Redding, where Redding is a car town. So as you proceed through this process and you have a main thing to say about it as a stakeholder, I hope you remember the fact that you moved here for a reason and that the people of the city of Redding have welcomed you. It's a friendly place to be, but enjoy the river with us. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next person.
Next person is Joyce Crowler, and I'm just going to double check the microphone and make sure we're.
Okay. Does that work?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, first of all, I certainly agree that there should be a parking structure for the rodeo grounds and civic auditorium. Unlike the one that's downtown, it would probably be well used. I believe that any commercial development should be enough distance from the river to allow for public access to at least a sidewalk area that could be a beautiful walkway. Let's see, after all, the river is for us to enjoy. It's not for the people who might live in the top floor of the apartment building. I also wanted to address the noise issue. There are currently outdoor concerts at the auditorium, and they must provide a lot of noise. So I think that shouldn't even really be an issue as far as the habitat in the river. Regarding the any commercial development on the southern area, there could be double-deck parking structure that would take up less of a footprint and still provide plenty of parking for the different venues. And regarding the people having to drive there, most visitors do have to drive to get there. they're driving the freeway in their car and they've got their family in the car and they want to go and see something in Redding that's available for them and their children or their dogs. And there's got to be a place for them to go to park that car so they can get out and get on the little shuttle or the whatever there might be to get you from point A to B. And let's see, I think that's about it. I believe that the river should be accessible by us, the public, us, the visitor, us, just us. When I first moved to Redding, you could walk down to the river. You could touch the water. And that's almost an impossibility now in town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Appreciate your comments. And the next speaker is?
Delia Rios.
Not here. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Do I have to push a button or anything?
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Delia Rios. I moved here from Morgan Hill area. I worked at IBM. I retired. My husband worked at Rose Electric. He retired. And what made us move here and choose Redding was because of the beauty, the river, the eagle, the fish. It wasn't crowded. It's been about 18 years. It wasn't crowded. Today I walked the river. I enjoy looking at the fish jumping, and you can see the salmon. You know where to go. But I have to say things are changing, and we thought about maybe leaving again because we see a lot more people, more crowds. We got the electric scooters, you know, which I don't like because they just, you know, but I understand the younger folks want more activities here. They want more enjoyment, concert, music. I love music. And Anderson River Park has wonderful music there. They have a beautiful park. So there's other places besides just the riverfront in Turtle Bay. And I'm just afraid that I'm not seeing the deers I used to see. We saw the Christmas in the Light Park, which is nice, but you see the deers in there and they're running. They don't like the lights. They don't like the kids running after them. So Redding is changing, but not for the best. I'm sorry. I have to say that. I looked around. We moved all over. We went to Bend, Oregon. We have neighbors that moved from Bend, Oregon because they are building a lot. And they don't like Bend, Oregon. So be careful what you're looking at and what you're choosing. This was a beautiful place, still is. And I look forward to seeing people leaving. When they're on vacation, they go back home. And it's beautiful in the winter. I took some beautiful pictures with the snow. It's not crowded, a lot of nature. So Redding is beautiful. Keep it that way, please. So God bless. I have to say that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next speaker?
Ronian Lund.
Good evening, coalition members. My name is Ronine. I'm just going to rattle off a bunch of thoughts here. I agree with Melissa. I think it was Melissa that talked about the Surplus Land Act and affordable. Anyway, I'm jumping all over because my notes are horrible. Let's see. Anyway, the Surplus Land Act. I think the city needs to. Yeah, it was Melissa that the city needs to keep the property that they owned in public land. I was thinking that we need to keep, you know, an area down there on the northern portion for the 4th of July, cool April nights, concerts, whatever. But then somebody mentioned about, you know, the natural environment and the issues that those kind of events pose to that. And then I was thinking, and this is just an idea, you know, in my mind, we need a better convention center, you know, one that can handle sporting events, cool April nights, concerts, that, you know, has rooms for conventions, etc. So I'm wondering if in the long run we could have a convention center that could handle all those activities, including, you know, concerts, potentially a lot of Cool April Nights things, and, you know, get those things away from the environment and inside. And we could even have an open roof like some of the venues do, so that, you know, if we wanted to have a rodeo in there and have it open, we could. So I'm just throwing that out there. I think housing in the study area should be limited to the existing residential developments, and it sounds like Mr. Koutras, you know, has some ideas about that, about maybe utilizing the residential areas that are already there. From what I know about fisheries issues, I don't believe Fish and Wildlife or NOAA fisheries would allow a water structure because of our designation up here. I just thought I'd throw that out there. We have a venue, the gazebo, the little gazebo area down there by the sundial. I've been to several events there, and it's just a nice little area where people can go. They don't have to pay. They don't have to, well, actually, maybe they do have to pay. I'll take that back. But if they want to have an organized event, but it's just a small venue that's outside, and somebody mentioned having areas like that. I think it's important to keep that, or have an area that is like that. Probably running out of time here. Let's see. The Cinemark, I just wanted to say that would be a great site for a Native American cultural center. And I don't know if any of the Native American representatives have ever considered that, or if they want to bring that to anybody's attention, but I think that would be a great site for that. One last thing, pedestrian bridge. It could go all the way over across all the crossings all the way to the east side of Park Marina and bypass all that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well done. Okay, we have a few more speakers.
Three more. Catherine McDonald.
Somebody help her with the mic.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Jared. So, not to beat the traffic issue in the garden tract to death, but I live in the garden tract and I'm already experiencing too much traffic and people going too fast. And one of the statements that you put up for the vision or whatever says, quote, consider how development on Park Marina will impact existing traffic concerns. That language is very vague. Consider how. And I worked as an environmental analyst for environmental consulting firm for 25 years. And my worry is when you get around to writing the EIR, the traffic through the garden tract is going to be considered significant and unavoidable. And then there will be a statement of overriding concerns and our neighborhood will be screwed. The other issue that I am worried about, and I haven't heard any discussion of from Chris Koutras, is the trailer park down along the river behind Park Marina. I don't know who owns that land, but I would hate to see the people living there evicted and become homeless. They're obviously low-income people, or, you know, I assume they are. So that's something I haven't heard anything about, but it does worry me. We already have a homeless problem. And I agree. I mean, it's a terrible place for a trailer park. Never should have happened, but it is. And then as far as the Surplus Land Act goes, I don't know who's going to pay for things like a new bridge or community centers in the northern part of the specific plan area. But it seems to me that the city is going to have to sell some of the land it owns to pay for what's envisioned. And then it becomes subject to the Surplus Land Act. And I just hope that that's taken into consideration. And also, you know, I don't know how this is happening. When there was the unsolicited offer last spring, I think, people showed up in droves opposed to anything being done. And the city council went ahead and decided for some reason to go through this very expensive process that I don't think is going to improve Redding. People, as somebody said, people come here because it's beautiful. They don't come here for fancy restaurants or expensive designer clothing outlets. They come here because it's beautiful. So
Okay.
that's what I have to say.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And next speaker
is Susan Murray.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I believe that there is a need to keep the city moving in the right direction and to provide for the needs of the city of Redding business owners, the residents of Redding, and the tourists that come to our city. But how to create this for everyone's needs and how it will enhance Redding, bringing in additional revenue to our city. That seems like the big question. One mistake that is that not only I have seen living in the Garden Tract for 30 years is the Sundial Bridge Drive overpass. That is a mess, especially for cool April nights, the 4th of July, concerts at the City Auditorium, and the rodeo events. I, as a resident, never go to these celebrations due to the congestion that those venues bring, and I am sure that I'm really missing out on a great time. I am sure some of you or your families have witnessed the same problem with the congestion. When these venues are over and the families return to their cars to go home, what roads do they take? The freeway, the Garden Tract, or the Park Marina Drive? Some people have stated that emergency road through the cemetery would be a great answer. It's not the answer. Please come up with better solutions with the Garden Tract in mind and what an impact your decisions will have on this residential old tract. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. And our last speaker this evening,
Jennifer Pullum.
Hi, good evening. Yep, we're on. Thank you, Community Coalition, and all the work that the group has done on this, the team members. The one thing that I didn't see in the emerging Redding Riverfront vision elements was security. I saw something about safety. And the one thing that I actually did hear, you know, it's about the seasonality of Redding, but also the fact that things need to have eyes on it throughout the night too. And that's one reason that I do support housing on the southern portion. If you think about the river trail and where it goes, there's housing oftentimes on one side of it so that there's eyes on the trail and people can report things that they see on the trail. So for the southern portion, I do think that small amount of housing would be helpful on that east side of Park Marina, south of where there already is some housing, so that there will be eyes on any trails that are developed in that area or any connectivity that would happen. The one thing I have with the Surplus Land Act idea, a lot of that land on the Turtle Bay section is gravel, asphalt, parking already. I would just say anything that is done, it needs to have a conservation or a recreation easement along the riverfront so that the city of Redding does not give up the right of access for the general public to the riverfront. Otherwise, the rest of it, you know, the way it gets developed on, I'm talking about the northern section to the south of the river, If there's a wide enough easement there, it probably things better could be done there. It could be improved from what it is now. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Just a few things before we head out this evening. Wanted to cover on our presentation screen here. Let's see, Dan, you got it ready to go? Yeah, it's not. Okay, keep going. All right, so just a reminder, our next meeting is November 6th, same place, same format. Meeting number 4, November 20th, that's Thanksgiving week. And then we hope to bring a draft document for City Council review and feedback at their December meeting. We don't yet have a date for that, but we'll let you know as soon as possible on that meeting. And that's it for this evening. Thank you, staff. Thank you, all of you, coalition members and members of the Redding community. Thanks. Have a great evening.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, you're good.
Recording stopped.